Mom, the baby of that lady is crying in a coin locker.
In the middle of my brother's wedding, my daughter pointed at the bride and shouted this. The entire room erupted in murmurs. After all, my brother and his wife weren't supposed to have a baby yet. And a coin locker. But my 5-year-old daughter had a mysterious power. However, the bride, unaware of this, turned pale, the guests became angry, and the room filled with voices accusing us of poor parenting. Even worse, our relatives stood up with fearful expressions and left the venue. Thus, my daughter caused the wedding to descend into chaos. But soon after, a more terrifying truth came to light. I got married at 25 and gave birth at 27. My husband said,
"She looks just like Nancy. She's so cute."
He hugged our newborn daughter, Emma, in the delivery room. Now she's 5. We noticed she had a strange ability when she was about 3. For example, one time when my mother was on the phone, my daughter suddenly said,
Grandma, you're talking to a fake uncle.
Uncle referred to my brother. I had my mother put the call on hold and asked her who she was talking to and about what. It turned out she was almost the victim of an impersonation scam. When we praised our daughter, she proudly put her hands on her hips and said,
The person behind told me.
Emma always says this when she uncovers something, so it's probably some kind of guardian spirit she can see. While her ability has often been helpful, it's not always a good thing, as she sometimes reveals people's secrets. Once, she even ruined a surprise party by spilling the secret to the person it was for. Emma is only 5, so she doesn't understand how to judge these things. That's why we've taught her not to mention what the person behind tells her in front of anyone outside the family. My brother John is someone Emma adores, and we have always been close. When he announced his wedding, my family was overjoyed. John works in research at a fairly large company, earning around $70,000 a year. However, since he hadn't been involved with any women until his late 30s, both he and our family had almost given up on the idea of him getting married. I've loved my gentle brother since we were little, and I always wished someone would eventually see his good qualities. What can you do? I guess John is just the type who remains a good guy but never more. I thought, trying to make peace with the situation. But when a woman finally agreed to marry him, our whole family welcomed her with open arms. The woman, Amy, is 34, for years younger than my brother, and apparently, she was the one who asked him out.
We started dating about 6 months ago, and recently, she was the one who proposed to me.
He told us this shyly, looking so happy that it made our family happy too. On the day John brought her over to introduce her as his fiancée, of course, I came along with my daughter.
Nice to meet you. I'm Amy. Thank you for having me.
As she bowed her head in greeting, Emma murmured happily,
The baby is coming too.
I interpreted this as meaning they would soon have children after getting married, which made me even more pleased. It was unusual for Emma to talk about the future, as she usually predicted things that were hidden in the present. Still, I didn't think much of it. But Amy gave Emma a strange look and glared at her.
What are you talking about? That's so creepy.
She shouted with an annoyed expression. Emma, it's okay. Amy is probably just surprised. I comforted my daughter, who looked scared and on the verge of tears from Amy's harsh reaction. Not everyone believed in Emma's abilities, and some, like Amy, found them unsettling. That might be the normal reaction. But since she was the woman my brother had chosen, I believed she would eventually understand. So, I focused on calming Emma down at that moment. She probably just associated marriage with having a baby. It's just something a child would say, so don't worry about it, Amy. Even so, it was the first time someone had reacted so strongly. Something feels off, I thought, but Amy otherwise seemed polite and kind, so I tried not to let it bother me. However, on the day of the wedding, something unexpected happened. The ceremony was solemn, with both families gathered together, and everything proceeded smoothly up to a certain point. The vows were exchanged, and the ceremony was approaching its finale when suddenly, Emma stood up. My husband and I hurriedly tried to get her to sit down quietly, but she suddenly ran forward and pointed at the bride.
The baby of this lady is crying in a coin locker.
When I looked at Amy, who was at the end of Emma's gaze, she had gone pale and was muttering something under her breath. Since I was near the bride's seat, trying to stop Emma, I barely caught her saying things like,
How did she know?
and,
What the hell is that kid?
seeing her panicked reaction, I realized that Emma had hit the mark. But only a few of us, including myself, understood this. Amy quickly raised her head and glared at Emma.
Stop saying nonsense. What baby? Just because you're a child doesn't mean you can ruin my wedding.
The bride's outburst seemed to convince her relatives to side with her. It wasn't surprising since, to those unaware of Emma's mysterious ability, it would seem like she had suddenly blurted out something absurd. However, hearing murmurs like, "What terrible manners!" from the bride's side made my chest tighten with pain. But she's telling the truth. And as I looked around, I noticed that our relatives also had terrifying expressions, which only made me shrink back even more. But unlike me, who felt pathetic, Emma bravely stood tall, her head held high.
The baby is crying for help. It's in a coin locker at a nearby department store. Someone, please go help.
My little daughter desperately repeated her words, undeterred by the cold stares from the adults around her. And the moment they heard this, our relatives, still wearing those stern expressions, stood up, ready to follow Emma's words. Saying that saving the baby's life was the top priority, they began to leave the venue one by one. Despite our efforts to keep her quiet, our young Emma had sometimes let slip information about the person behind her. This is why our relatives knew about her ability. They often watched over her, joking that there was no risk of being deceived as long as Emma was around. So at that moment, they must have immediately believed her plea. Now that I think about it, when they had those terrifying expressions, they seemed to be glaring at the bride. My husband, saying he would go with them, left Emma in my care and followed our relatives out. Less than an hour later, I received a call from my husband and was able to hear about the situation. It seems that thanks to Emma's words and the collective effort of our relatives, the baby was found. However, it couldn't be said that the baby was safe. There was a lot of commotion at the scene, and according to my husband, the baby looked as though it had just been born. The baby appeared limp, and it was immediately clear that its condition was critical, so they quickly called an ambulance. Why would Amy do something like this? No matter what the circumstances, this is unforgivable. As anger welled up inside me, I asked my husband to get help from the people around him for a few specific tasks. I also made a call to a certain place. After taking care of everything I needed to do, I left Emma with my mother, who was with me, and headed to the waiting room where my brother and Amy were. My brother was in the waiting room, trying to get an explanation from her. However, since there was no solid evidence yet, I didn't expect Amy to easily admit to anything. My brother likely wanted to believe in his fiancée, so he probably wasn't able to push her too hard and was just trying to keep her there. That's why I knew I had to go to them after hearing what my husband had told me. When I entered the waiting room, Amy was completely frustrated. Not only had the ceremony been interrupted, but in the chaos, the scheduled time for the wedding had passed, and it could no longer be resumed. Amy snapped.
There's a set time we can use the chapel. You know that, right? That time has already passed. Why would John's relatives take a kid's words so seriously?
To her, it must have felt like her special day had been utterly ruined. Not only that, but the start of the reception had also been delayed, and all the guests, except for our relatives, were kept waiting. Amy continued.
That brat is totally unacceptable. She keeps saying creepy things. What is she? Some kind of curse? I swear, I want to dump her in a mountain.
Emma was a beloved niece to my brother, who was doing his best to calm Amy down. However, when she spoke about his niece like that, he couldn't help but frown. John, you should call off the wedding, I told my brother, trying to keep the fury boiling inside me from showing in my voice. I said it as calmly as I could. Amy turned her bloodshot eyes toward me, glaring, but John remained composed as if he'd anticipated my suggestion. He sighed quietly.
So what Emma said was right after all. I was hoping she'd be wrong this time.
Though he only managed a slight, bitter smile, I could tell his heart was sinking in sadness. Amy then rounded on me, her face twisted in rage.
What the hell do you think you're doing? Accusing me without any proof, ruining the wedding, and now you want to call it off.
She was furious, and she advanced on me like a demon, not even noticing the look of disappointment on John's face. Amy shouted,
If that brat isn't going to be held accountable, then you should be. Pay up for damages, or better yet, I'll sue you for defamation and make you pay a hefty settlement.
Amy's loud voice echoed through the room, and I had to resist the urge to cover my ears. So you said there's no proof, huh? But Emma was right, wasn't she? A baby was actually found. Do you understand what that means? Amy scoffed.
And so what? Some random kid was found somewhere. What does that have to do with me?
It has everything to do with you. A DNA test will easily reveal who the mother is, and when it does, it'll be undeniable proof that you have a secret child. There's no way out of this. As soon as I said that, it occurred to me that there was a small possibility that the baby might not be her secret child. John, I don't think so, but is there any chance that baby is yours? I asked just to be sure, although it seemed impossible since they'd only been dating for 6 months. John replied firmly,
Absolutely not. The timing doesn't match up.
His unwavering response caused Amy to scowl in frustration. If John had acted like a normal man and made a move, We could have raised the child as our own. But now, it's all ruined because you're so slow. Her absurd attempt to shift the blame made me sigh deeply in exasperation. So, who is the father? Amy hesitated before replying.
It's a child from a previous boyfriend, but I don't know which one.
Her answer left both my brother and me speechless. That meant there were multiple possible fathers, which was shocking. How many people had she been seeing at once? Having a child with an unknown father was entirely her own reckless doing, and trying to blame John was utterly misplaced.
If I'd known she was this kind of woman, I would never have considered marriage. No, I should be thankful I found out before the wedding ended. The marriage hasn't been registered yet. I'm going to call it off.
John heaved a deep sigh before making his decision, and Amy looked at him like she was the victim. Amy then whined,
I specifically chose the guy with the most money. What about my future plans? How are you going to fix this?
During the formal meeting, she had declared how much she loved John more than anyone else. But hearing her lament now made it clear that was a complete lie. She was only trying to marry him for his high salary. Amy continued to rant.
Getting pregnant ruined everything. I finally caught an elite, and now to find out I'm carrying someone else's baby? This is just bad luck.
According to the story she confessed to, playing the role of the tragic heroine, Amy realized she was pregnant quite late. It was a combination of factors. She had irregular periods, experienced very mild morning sickness, and her belly didn't show much. All of these things contributed to her delayed awareness. Amy had tried to pretend the pregnancy didn't exist, but by the time she visited an obstetrician, she had already passed 22 weeks, which was too late for that option. So, she decided to hide the pregnancy from everyone, including my brother, give birth in secret, and then abandon the baby. Since her belly didn't show much, she took advantage of that by wearing loose-fitting clothes to hide her figure. She also blamed her limited physical movement on general health issues. No one suspected that she was pregnant, so they didn't question her behavior. Amy complained,
John's desire to have the wedding around this time was just bad luck for me. But if I objected without a reason, it would have seemed suspicious.
What concerned her most during the wedding preparations was whether the waistline of her dress would fit on the day of the ceremony. With her due date so close, she couldn't predict whether she'd give birth before or after the wedding. Well, usually, people avoid scheduling weddings in the final month of pregnancy. Amy responded,
Exactly. But how could I possibly say I was pregnant? So, I had no choice but to pick a dress that could accommodate any changes in my size.
As she spoke, she showed off her wedding dress with an adjustable waistline. My husband added,
So, the story about gaining weight but planning to diet because your size might change was a lie too. And so was the business trip excuse.
According to my brother, Amy claimed she had an urgent overseas business trip from the previous week until the morning of the wedding, which is why they hadn't seen each other. But she was probably in the hospital for the birth, not abroad. Amy said,
I was so nervous that the baby might be born right in the middle of the ceremony.
Her priorities were completely misplaced as she casually mentioned that the baby was born just a week before the wedding and that she had been discharged from the hospital only the day before. Amy laughed and said,
I wanted to get rid of the baby as quickly as possible, so I didn't even bring it home. I went straight from the locker to the wedding venue. Just barely made it in time.
Her casual attitude was shocking. Amy continued.
But I left the baby in a locker where lots of people pass by. Someone would have heard it crying and taken care of it. The area has good air conditioning, so it's fine.
By saying it's fine, she was trying to claim that she hadn't done anything dangerous. What are you talking about? Did you really think everything would work out that smoothly? In reality, the baby's cries were mostly drowned out by the noise in the department store. Even those who heard the cries assumed it was just someone else's child. If Emma hadn't insisted on searching for the baby, it might have been in serious danger, as evidenced by the fact that it was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. Abandoning a newborn like that is beyond unacceptable. Even if you couldn't raise the child, you should have at least taken it to a facility. Amy shrugged and said,
What else could I have done? The baby was born just before the wedding. I was in a rush, so it couldn't be helped.
Her lack of remorse was infuriating. My brother was just as stunned, realizing what kind of person he had almost married. Let me make this clear. What you did could lead to criminal charges. Do you understand that? Amy's eyes widened in surprise, and she began to panic, looking around anxiously.
There's no evidence. You said earlier that they could easily find out I'm the mother, but the police can't prove I was the one who left the baby in the locker.
She wiped the sweat from her forehead and confidently said this, believing she was in the clear. You really don't think things through, do you? Did you even check if there were security cameras in the area? The locker area was fully covered by security cameras, something I had already taken steps to verify. After hearing about the baby's discovery, I asked my husband to request the store staff to review the footage. I had also reported the incident to the police, so they were likely checking the footage as well. Additionally, I had sent my husband a photo of John and Amy together. A celebratory picture my brother had taken during their pre-wedding photo shoot. Never imagining it would be used to identify someone on security footage. With my husband likely showing that photo to the store staff or the police, it was only a matter of time before they reached Amy. As I explained all of this, Amy's face turned paler with each passing moment, and by the time I finished, she had collapsed onto the floor, her face as white as a sheet.
No! That's not possible. They can't know. You're bluffing, right? They can't arrest me.
She muttered in disbelief, struggling to accept reality. But when the police arrived shortly after, she suddenly became violent, resisting arrest.
No! Let go of me! It's not my fault! It's all because of that brat and those people.
My brother, his face blank with shock, watched her struggle, the extent of his devastation clear to see. I turned back to Amy. You mentioned that you haven't officially registered the marriage, right? Legally, you're still just his fiancée, not his wife. But you'll still have to pay compensation.
Compensation?
Amy stammered. My brother will decide the amount, but will definitely recover the costs of the wedding and the reception. This marriage you were so keen on has turned into a huge loss for you, but we won't go easy on you. Upon hearing this, Amy's face fell into despair, and she finally gave up resisting as she was taken away. After that, of course, the wedding reception was cancelled, and all the monetary gifts were returned. The expenses incurred were, as declared, billed to Amy in the form of compensation. However, since she was behind bars and unable to pay immediately, her parents had to cover the costs. The amount exceeded $40,000, but her parents insisted that she would repay every cent once she was released. Even though they were her parents, it was clear they would be strict in making her pay it back, especially since Amy's father, who had always seemed mild-mannered, was so furious that it was intimidating to witness. Fortunately, the baby survived and, after being safely discharged from the hospital, was taken in by Amy's parents. It seems the child is now growing up healthy and strong. As for my brother, he was down for a while after everything that happened, but recently he's found someone new, and they seem to have a great relationship. My daughter said,
The person behind Uncle says they're a perfect match.
When he introduced the new woman to Emma, my daughter happily shared this with us. His new fiancée has embraced Emma's unique abilities, and both my brother and I, as well as Emma, are filled with excitement and hope for the future. How did you enjoy this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.